Well, I mean, I know of J.B. Fletcher, but I thought he was an author. No, I mean, if you're the J.B. Fletcher I know of, I just didn't know you were a woman.
Remember when 70s and 80s TV shows just crashed into each other on a random Tuesday? One minute you were watching a detective, the next a sitcom character stumbled in. It was a wild, lawless time for television. Today, we're revisiting the most unexpected, forgotten crossovers ever. 1. Magnum, P.I., and Simon and Simon.
Hey, Magnum, how you doing?
Hi, guys.
Hello, Magnum. How's the shoulder?
Oh, it's fine.
Before they crossed paths, Magnum P.I. was the epitome of 80s cool, living the dream in Hawaii with Ferraris, a beachfront estate, and the occasional elimination case to keep things interesting. Tom Selleck as Magnum wasn't your typical tough guy action hero. He was funny, flawed, and somehow always one step away from disaster, no matter how cool he looked doing it. Meanwhile, Simon and Simon was solving cases in San Diego with two bickering brothers, one beat-up pickup truck, and a whole lot of questionable fashion choices. They were completely different shows with the same chaotic energy. On October 7th, 1982, CBS had a brilliant thought. What if we smashed them together like an awkward high school group project and somehow made it work? It all started with a cursed Hawaiian idol and some stolen emeralds, leading two sets of detectives down a collision course. Magnum was chasing one lead, the Simons were chasing another, involving Morgan Fairchild, of course, and boom, crossover. It kicked off in Magnum, P.I.'s Keys Don't Lie, and rolled straight into Simon and Simon's Emeralds Are Not a Girl's Best Friend. The vibes didn't match at all. Magnum was pure, sun-soaked swagger, and Simon was pure, we just rolled out of bed and solved a crime. But somehow, like peanut butter and bacon, it just worked. The ratings spiked, Simon stuck around for years, and CBS proved that throwing characters together was basically the 80s version of building a cinematic universe. 2. Murder, She Wrote, and Magnum. P.
I'm sure you'd rather wait for your investigator to get here.
She's here.
If you're feeling déjà vu, you're right. Our favorite Hawaiian detective was back at it again, but this time he was trading car chases for brainy banter with TV's most unstoppable mystery writer, Jessica Fletcher. Murder, She Wrote was cozy crime-solving at its absolute finest. Jessica wasn't a cop. She was a retired English teacher turned best-selling author who somehow stumbled across more dead bodies than an entire season of CSI. For 12 seasons, it was infinite sweaters and endlessly solved murders. On November 19, 1986, CBS threw these two titans together in a wild two-part event. It started in the Magnum P.I. episode Novel Connection, where Angela Lansbury's Jessica arrived in Hawaii only to find Magnum himself accused of murder. The story then wrapped up the following Sunday in the Murder, She Wrote episode Magnum on Ice, where Magnum, through sheer bad luck, managed to get arrested for a different murder. Watching Magnum's punch first, ask questions later vibe clash with Jessica's quietly destroy you with logic style was pure TV gold. Picture Magnum tripping over a clue while Jessica solves the whole case before finishing her morning coffee. That was the vibe, and it clicked perfectly, delivering a crossover with real payoff. One part aloha, one part alibi, and too good to stay forgotten. 3rd Street Elsewhere and Cheers.
Welcome to Cheers, Doctors Jekyll and Hyde.
Who recommended this?
In one corner, you had Saint. Elsewhere, the gritty, groundbreaking medical drama that showed hospital life as messy, complicated, and heartbreakingly human. It was prestige TV before the term existed. In the other corner, you had Cheers, the ultimate neighborhood bar sitcom where the jokes were sharp, the friendships ran deep, and everybody knew your name. On paper, these two shows had nothing in common besides being set in Boston and airing on NBC. On November 28, 1985, NBC decided to have a little fun. Instead of a full-blown crossover event, they pulled off something even cooler, a shared universe moment before anyone was calling it that. In the Saint Elsewhere episode titled, fittingly, Cheers, Three of the hospital's top doctors, Westphal, Auslander, and Craig, wandered into the actual Cheers bar for a quick drink after a tough day. There was no big plot twist, just a surreal little wink to the audience that said, yeah, these shows exist in the same Boston. Norm even casually joked, we get a lot of people from St. Eligius in here, confirming the crossover without making a big deal of it. It wasn't flashy or hyped. It was TV's version of an inside joke, and for fans who caught it, it was pure magic. It was a tiny spark that predicted the Marvel Cinematic Universe decades early. 4. My Two Dads and Night Court. Night Court was pure late-night mayhem, a courtroom full of oddballs, scam artists, and the weirdest defendants New York City had to offer. It wasn't just another legal sitcom, it was a circus where the staff was weirder than the criminals. My Two Dads, on the other hand, was a quintessential 80s family sitcom about two very different men. One a straight-laced businessman, Paul Reiser, the other a free-spirited artist, Greg Evigan, raising a teenage daughter because they didn't know which one was her biological dad. Hey, it was the 80s. Standing at the center of this crossover chaos was Bull Shannon, Night Court's towering, lovable bailiff. He looked like he could flatten you with one finger, but deep down, Bull was a big softy with the heart of a golden retriever. On March 1st, 1989, NBC made the ultimate sitcom power move. In the My Two Dads episode, Playing with Fire, the family's friend, Judge Wilbur, faced a threat from a released convict, and Bull was assigned to protect her. This meant Bull had to move into their nice, normal suburban home. Watching Bull, a guy built for midnight madness, try to handle PTA drama and kitchen cleanups was straight-up sitcom gold. This crossover had more awkward energy than your parents discovering TikTok, and it remains one of the most unexpected and heartwarming team-ups of the decade. 5th, Day by Day and Family Ties.
I made a pact with myself never to speak to you again.
First things first. Day by Day wasn't a spin-off of Family Ties. It was its own NBC sitcom about a couple who ditched their high-powered careers to open a daycare center in their home. The show's dad, Brian Harper, was said to be Stephen Keaton's old college roommate, but that was more of a fun fact than a real connection. Still, for one glorious moment, their worlds collided. Family Ties, of course, was the iconic sitcom that captured the clash between 60s idealism and 80s ambition, turning Michael J. Fox into a global superstar. In the Day by Day episode Trading Places, Brian, stressed out about his new life, dozes off and dreams he is Alex P. Keaton. Briefcase, sweater vest, Reagan posters, all check. Suddenly, we were back in the Family Ties living room with Michael J. Fox himself making a guest appearance, still owning the role that made him a household name. It wasn't just a wink, it was primetime crossover magic, dropping one of NBC's biggest stars into a completely different show just because they could. Day by Day didn't stick around much longer, but for one weird, wonderful moment, it basked in the glow of a TV icon. 6. The Jeffersons and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Who the man?
This one sneaks in just past the 80s, but it's rooted in one of the most iconic sitcoms of the 70s. The Jeffersons were a television institution, having moved on up from Archie Bunker's neighborhood to a deluxe apartment in the sky. For 11 seasons, George and Wheezy were the definition of sitcom royalty. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, meanwhile, was the 90s phenom that made Will Smith a star. In a brilliant piece of stunt casting, Will and his girlfriend Lisa decide to go to marriage counseling in the Fresh Prince episode, Will is from Mars. Their counselors, none other than George and Louise Jefferson themselves, making a surprise guest appearance. What people miss is this key detail. This wasn't just a cameo. The episode treated them as the actual characters who had apparently moved from New York to Los Angeles. Seeing George Jefferson give Will Smith love advice was a collision of two different eras of black television excellence. It was a hilarious, heartwarming moment that served as a perfect passing of the torch from one legendary sitcom family to another. 7. Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley.
Hey, little respect here. This is my godson, Danny Corrigan Jr.
Hi, dear Danny. Hi, sweet.
This is the OG of sitcom crossovers, the one that wrote the playbook. Happy Days was a wholesome, nostalgic look at the 1950s, centered on the Cunningham family and their impossibly cool, leather-jacketed friend, the Fonz. It was one of the biggest shows on television. Gary Marshall, the show's creator, decided to introduce two new female characters for a double date with Fonzie and Richie, Laverne DeFazio and Shirley Feeney. The characters were an instant hit. They were brassy, funny, and completely different from the squeaky clean girls usually seen on the show. And then something totally unexpected happened. The audience reaction was so massive that Gary Marshall immediately gave them their own spin-off, Laverne and Shirley. The new show was set in the same Milwaukee universe, and the characters crossed over constantly in the early seasons. Fonzie would pop over to their apartment, or Laverne and Shirley would drop by Arnold's drive-in. It wasn't a one-time event. It was a fluid, shared universe that made both shows feel bigger and more connected. It was a masterclass in world-building, 70s style. 8. Mork and Mindy and Happy Days. After the wild success of the Laverne and Shirley spin-off, Gary Marshall decided to press his luck with an even more bizarre idea. In the Happy Days episode, my favorite Orkin, Richie Cunningham, is worried about a story for the school paper when he's visited by an alien named Mork from the planet Ork, who wants to take him back to his home planet as a human specimen. The role of Mork was played by a then-unknown hyperactive comedian named Robin Williams. Williams's manic, improvisational energy was unlike anything audiences had ever seen on primetime television. He completely stole the show. At first, it looked harmless, but the network executives realized they had lightning in a bottle. Just like with Laverne and Shirley, Mork was immediately given his own spin-off, Mork and Mindy. The new show retconned his meeting with Richie as a dream, and Mork instead landed in Boulder, Colorado to study Earthlings. The crossover was a bizarre, hilarious moment that launched the career of a comedic genius and created one of the most beloved sitcoms of the era, all because of one weird episode of Happy Days. 9. The Facts of Life and Different Strokes.
So, you want to marry Mrs. Garrett, huh?
Arnold, cool it.
This crossover is less of a single event and more of a foundational piece of sitcom history. Different Strokes was a massive hit about two brothers from Harlem, Arnold and Willis, adopted by a wealthy white millionaire, Philip Drummond. One of the most beloved characters was the Drummonds' warm and witty housekeeper, Edna Garrett. In 1979, the producers decided to give Mrs. Garrett her own show. Here's where it all takes a sharp turn. In a Different Strokes episode, Mrs. Garrett takes a job as the house mother at the nearby Eastland School for Girls, the setting for the new spin-off, The Facts of Life. The crossover was the entire premise. Unlike other spin-offs that moved characters to a new city, these two shows existed side by side. Characters from both shows would frequently pop up in the other, especially in the early seasons. Arnold and Willis would visit Mrs. Garrett at Eastland, or the girls from The Facts of Life would visit the Drummonds' lavish Park Avenue penthouse. It created a cozy, interconnected world that made both shows feel like part of one big, extended, and very 80s family. 10. Hello, Larry and Different Strokes.
Hey, listen, your mother and I are separated. Now, you can't keep calling her every time something comes up.
If The Facts of Life was the successful spin-off of Different Strokes, then Hello, Larry was its infamous, critically savaged sibling. The show starred McLean Stevenson from MASH as Larry Alder, a radio talk show host who moves to Portland, Oregon with his 2 teenage daughters. To give the show a boost, the network decided to reveal that Larry was an old Army buddy of Philip Drummond. It was supposed to be easy until it wasn't. The network shoehorned in crossover after crossover, desperately trying to get the massive Different Strokes audience to watch Hello, Larry. The Drummonds would fly to Portland, or Larry would visit New York. The most famous crossover had Arnold uttering the line, "That's Larry Alder," the man who bought the radio station I Own, a plot point that came out of nowhere. The constant crossovers backfired, making Hello, Larry feel like a pathetic little brother constantly begging for attention. The show became a running joke and was canceled after 2 seasons, a textbook example of how not to do a crossover. 11th, Family Matters and Full House.
Hi, Laura. I hear you can't get a date for the dance.
This is another 90s crossover, but its roots are pure 80s family sitcom cheese. Full House was the San Francisco set ratings behemoth about 3 men raising 3 girls. Family Matters was the Chicago-based sitcom that was completely hijacked by its nerdy, suspender-wearing neighbor, Steve Urkel. Both were cornerstones of ABC's TGIF lineup. In the Full House episode Stephanie Gets Framed, Stephanie is nervous about getting glasses. Who should show up to reassure her but Steve Urkel himself, who is in town visiting his cousin. He gives Stephanie a pep talk about wearing glasses, shares his nerdy wisdom, and even does his signature "Did I do that?" catchphrase. From the outside, it seemed simple. Until you dig deeper. The crossover made absolutely no logical sense. How did he get there? Why was he giving advice to a random girl? It didn't matter. It was a pure, unfiltered dose of corporate synergy, a move designed to get every kid in America to watch both shows. And it worked. 12th, Benson and Webster.
Margaret Truman gave me a rubber snake.
Margaret Truman?
No relation.
In the 80s, 2 of the most prominent black sitcoms were Benson and Webster. Benson, a spin-off of the parody show Soap, starred Robert Guillaume as the sharp-witted butler-turned-state budget director for a bumbling governor. Webster starred Emmanuel Lewis as an adorable young orphan adopted by a white couple. In a rare and heartwarming crossover between 2 shows on the same network, ABC, the worlds collided. In a 1984 episode of Webster, the title character is a huge fan of Governor Gatling and gets a chance to visit the governor's mansion. There, he meets and befriends Benson. The 2 share a sweet, funny conversation with the usually cynical Benson showing his softer side when talking to the young boy. It wasn't a ratings-grabbing stunt. It was a quiet, character-driven moment that celebrated 2 of the most beloved black television characters of the era. It was a simple, charming crossover that has been almost completely forgotten today. 13. Out of the Blue and Mork and Mindy.
Now that that's settled, who wants some popcorn?
This is one of the deepest and weirdest cuts on the entire list. After Mork and Mindy became a smash hit, another network, ABC, decided to create its own fantasy sitcom called Out of the Blue. The show was about a guardian angel named Random who was sent to Earth to look after a family. It was, to put it mildly, not a hit. In a desperate attempt to boost its ratings, the network orchestrated a crossover with Mork and Mindy. You won't believe what came next. In an episode of Out of the Blue, Mork makes an appearance, meeting the angel Random. The 2 otherworldly beings have a conversation, with Mork, of course, being his usual manic self. The twist? Mork refers to the big guy, a name he often used for Orson, his unseen boss on Ork. Random, the angel, assumes Mork is talking about God. It was a bizarre, confusing crossover that did nothing to save the show. Out of the Blue was canceled after only a handful of episodes, and its brief interaction with Mork from Ork remains a baffling piece of forgotten TV trivia. 14. The The $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman.
And just as modest as ever.
And you still know how to shoot me down, don't you?
Can I walk you home?
Oh, you bet.
While not strictly sitcoms, these action-adventure shows had enough humor and heart to qualify for this list, and their crossover is one of the most important in TV history. The $6 Million Man starred Lee Majors as astronaut Steve Austin, who was rebuilt with bionic parts after a crash. He was a pop culture phenomenon. The producers decided to give Steve a love interest, a professional tennis player named Jaime Summers. In a tragic two-part episode, Jaime is critically injured in a skydiving accident. Here's where it all takes a sharp turn. At Steve's desperate plea, she is also given bionic surgery. However, her body rejects the bionics, and she tragically dies on the operating table. Or so we thought. The public outcry was so immense that the network brought her back. They revealed she had been cryogenically frozen until her body could be saved. This led to her own wildly successful spin-off, The Bionic Woman. The two characters crossed over frequently, their shared history and tragic romance creating one of the most compelling dynamics on 70s television. 15. Sanford and Son and Grady.
Here, Gramps, don't you want to read the card? I wrote it.
You kidding? No, Gramps.
Sanford and Son was a groundbreaking sitcom about a cantankerous junkyard owner, Fred Sanford, and his long-suffering son, Lamont. In 1975, during a contract dispute with the show's star, Red Fox, the producers decided to give Grady his own spin-off. It was supposed to be easy, until it wasn't. The new show, Grady, saw the title character move out of the Sanford neighborhood to live with his daughter and her family. The problem was that Grady, who was a hilarious supporting player, simply wasn't interesting enough to carry his own show. Lamont Sanford even appeared in the pilot to help set it up, but the crossover magic didn't stick. The spin-off was a ratings disaster and was canceled after just 10 episodes. Grady was quickly brought back to Sanford and Son as if his disastrous solo adventure had never happened. 16. All in the Family and the Jeffersons.
Bye, blackbird, where somebody waits for me, sugar sweet, so is he.
This is another foundational crossover that changed the face of television. All in the Family was the most important sitcom of the 70s, a show that used comedy to tackle controversial issues. The show's lead, the lovable bigot Archie Bunker, was constantly at odds with his liberal family and his neighbors, the Jeffersons. Lionel Jefferson was Michael Stivick's best friend, and his parents, George and Louise, were Archie's primary antagonists. After several seasons of verbal sparring with Archie, the Jeffersons were given their own spin-off. And then came the part nobody expected. Instead of just moving them to a new neighborhood, the show moved them on up to a deluxe apartment on the east side of Manhattan. The crossover episode, titled simply The Jeffersons, served as the pilot for the new series with Archie and Edith saying a reluctant goodbye to their neighbors. The Jeffersons became a massive hit in its own right, running for 11 seasons and becoming one of the most successful spin-offs of all time. It was a perfect example of a crossover used not as a gimmick, but as a brilliant narrative launchpad. 17. The Love Boat, the Crossover Machine.
What is it, Mr. Smith?
Well, sir, we're having a little problem with the number 2 ENGINE.
The Love Boat wasn't just a show that had crossovers, it was a crossover machine. The entire premise of the show, a cruise ship where new guest stars boarded every week for a new romantic adventure, made it the perfect vehicle for stunt casting and bizarre team-ups. Throughout its 9-season run, the Pacific Princess hosted a mind-boggling array of characters from other TV shows. The cast of Charlie's Angels came aboard. Characters from Happy Days, Laverne, and Shirley, and even the cast of Gilligan's Island reprising their roles all took a cruise. The deeper you look, the stranger it gets. Even cartoon characters got in on the action, with an animated version of Tom and Jerry appearing in one episode. The Love Boat existed in a strange, magical universe where every TV character in Hollywood was just one cruise ticket away from finding romance on the high seas. It was less of a show and more of a weekly star-studded TV convention. 18. Growing Pains and Just the 10 of Us.
Oh, no. I have them doing power squats every day at about 3 o'clock.
Growing Pains was a beloved 80s family sitcom about the Seaver family, notable for turning teen heartthrob Kirk Cameron into a superstar. In the 4th season, the character of Coach Graham Lubbock was introduced as Mike Seaver's gym teacher. He was a goofy, lovable guy with a massive family. The character was popular enough that the network decided to give him a spin-off called Just the 10 of Us. The new show saw Coach Lubbock move his wife and their 8 children from Long Island to California to take a new job. The crossover was the pilot episode itself, which aired as an hour-long special following Growing Pains. The Seaver family even made an appearance in the spin-off to help launch it. The show was a moderate success, running for 3 seasons and becoming another solid entry in the 80s family sitcom canon, all thanks to its backdoor pilot crossover with its parent show. 19. Alice and the Jeffersons.
You think that was loud enough?
You kidding? You probably whistled that creep to death.
Here's a crossover almost everyone has forgotten. Alice was a long-running sitcom set in Mel's Diner, a greasy spoon in Phoenix, Arizona. The Jeffersons, as we know, was set in a luxury apartment in New York City. The two shows had absolutely nothing in common except that they both aired on CBS. In a 1981 episode of The Jeffersons titled Florence Did It Different, the Jeffersons' sharp-tongued maid, Florence, gets a new job offer and quits. Where does she go? She takes a bus all the way to Phoenix to become a waitress at Mel's Diner, right alongside Alice, Flo, and Vera. At first, it looked harmless, but the crossover was a strange, nonsensical collision of 2 completely separate worlds. Florence trades barbs with the grumpy Mel Sharples and tries to fit in with the other waitresses. Of course, by the end of the episode, she realizes she misses her old life and returns to the Jeffersons. It was a bizarre, one-off rating stunt that left audiences scratching their heads. 20. Alice and Flo.
See, Rance has offered me a lot more money than I'm making here and all sorts of fringe benefits. And being a hostess, Vera, that's...
This is another crossover from the Alice universe, but this one makes a lot more sense. One of the most popular characters on Alice was the feisty, man-hungry waitress Flo, known for her catchphrase, "Kiss my grits." The character, played by Polly Holliday, was so popular that she was given her own spin-off in 1980. The new show, Flo, saw the title character leave Mel's Diner and move back to her hometown in Texas to run her own honky-tonk bar. The crossover was baked into the premise. The spin-off was launched with Flo saying goodbye to her friends at the diner. The show was an initial hit, but its ratings quickly faded once Flo was separated from the ensemble she worked so well with. The show was canceled after 2 seasons, proving once again that taking a beloved supporting character out of their original environment is a very risky gamble. 21st Carter Country, and welcome back, Cotter.
Come in. I'm Mo Epstein, your landlord.
This is a subtle crossover that only the most eagle-eyed TV viewers would have caught. Welcome Back, Cotter was the 70s sitcom about a teacher returning to his inner-city high school to teach a group of wisecracking underachievers known as the Sweat Hogs. One of the recurring characters was Verna Jean, the girlfriend of the sweat hog Freddie Boom Boom Washington. She was played by actress Vernie Watson. Meanwhile, over on Carter Country, Vernie Watson also had a recurring role as the dispatcher for the Clinton Corners Police Department. What people miss is this key detail. She played the exact same character, Verna Jean, on both shows. In a 1978 episode of Carter Country, it's mentioned that Verna Jean has moved from Brooklyn to Georgia. It was a quiet, unhyped crossover that connected two completely unrelated sitcoms in different cities. 22. The Flintstones and the Jetsons.
This is how you got here?
But where from?
About 100 miles up.
And a million years in the future.
This is the crossover that blew every kid's mind in the 80s, a prehistoric meet-the-future event that felt like the biggest thing to ever happen on television. The Flintstones, a prehistoric blue-collar family sitcom, was a cornerstone of 60s animation. The Jetsons, its futuristic counterpart, imagined a world of flying cars and robot maids. They were two sides of the same Hanna-Barbera coin, existing in completely separate timelines. That all changed on November 15, 1987, with the premiere of the TV movie The Jetsons Meet the Flintstones. The plot was pure cartoon chaos. Elroy Jetson builds a time machine for a school project, and a mishap sends the entire Jetson family hurtling back to the Stone Age town of Bedrock. At the same time, the Flintstones and the Rubbles are accidentally sent forward into the Jetsons' futuristic world. Watching Fred Flintstone try to comprehend a food-o-matic while George Jetson panics over a brontosaurus was a surreal and hilarious collision of two iconic worlds. It wasn't just a cameo, it was a full-length feature that finally answered the question every kid had wondered: who would win in a fight, a dinosaur or a robot? 23. The Golden Girls, Empty Nest, and Nurses.
Dorothy, a domineering tyrant who totally emasculated him?
This wasn't just a crossover, it was a full-blown shared universe that dominated NBC's Saturday night lineup. The Golden Girls was, of course, the legendary sitcom about four older women sharing a home in Miami. Its spin-off, Empty Nest, centered on their neighbor, Dr. Harry Weston, and his two adult daughters. Later, Empty Nest got its own spin-off, Nurses, set in the same hospital where Dr. Weston worked. These shows were deeply intertwined. The Golden Girls would frequently pop over to Harry's house to complain about their ailments. Characters from Empty Nest and Nurses interacted constantly at the hospital. But the wild part is, the network even created crossover events. The most famous was Hurricane Saturday in 1991, where a hurricane hit Miami and the storyline flowed seamlessly through all three sitcoms in one night. It was an ambitious piece of television programming that created a cohesive, funny, and very Floridian universe. It was the original Law and Order night, but with more cheesecake and witty retorts. 24. Cheers and Wings.
You can sit right up here next to me.
Oh, that's great. Thank you there, Skipper. I got the old shotgun position.
Here's a crossover that was more of a long-running inside joke for dedicated TV fans. Wings was a sitcom about two brothers running a small airline on the island of Nantucket. It was created by former writers and producers from Cheers. While the shows had different settings, they were explicitly set in the same universe. The deeper you look, the stranger it gets. Over the course of Wings' run, several Cheers characters made the trip to Nantucket. In a 1990 episode, Norm and Cliff fly over for a fishing trip. Later, Frasier and Lilith Crane appear, leading a therapy group that the main characters are forced to attend. Even Carla's obnoxious ex-husband, Nick Tortelli, and their son Anthony showed up. These weren't just winks, they were full guest appearances that solidified the connection between the two shows. It was a subtle, rewarding crossover for fans, a quiet confirmation that the TV worlds of Boston and Nantucket were just a short, bumpy plane ride apart. 25. The Partridge Family and Goober and the Ghost Chasers.
Is that we haven't covered a good ghost story in days?
Yeah, the phone hasn't rung once all week.
If you thought Aliens Meeting Angels was weird, get ready for this one. The Partridge Family was the beloved live-action sitcom about a widowed mom and her 5 kids who formed a chart-topping pop band and toured the country in a psychedelic bus. Goober and the Ghost Chasers was a short-lived Hanna-Barbera cartoon that was, for all intents and purposes, a direct knockoff of Scooby-Doo, complete with a talking dog and mystery-solving teens. You won't believe what came next. In a truly bizarre collision of mediums, the animated Partridge Family appeared on an episode of Goober and the Ghost Chasers, titled The Partridge Family in a Haunted House. The entire animated cast of the family band gets tangled up in a mystery with Goober and his crew. It was a strange, fascinating piece of cross-promotion between a live-action sitcom and a Saturday morning cartoon. It made absolutely no sense, but for kids in 1973, seeing their favorite musical family animated alongside a ghost-hunting dog was probably the coolest thing ever. 26. The Brady Bunch and Mission Impossible.
What? I'm the fairy princess, and I get to fly and marry a prince and everything.
Terrific. That's great, Pumpkin.
This is the ultimate deep-cut crossover, a connection so strange and unexpected, it has become the stuff of TV legend. It wasn't a plot crossover or a character cameo, it was a crossover of sets. The Brady Bunch, of course, was the iconic sitcom about a lovely lady and a man named Brady. Their split-level suburban home, with its orange and avocado kitchen and floating staircase, is one of the most famous sets in television history. Here's where it all takes a sharp turn. In a 1971 episode of the deadly serious spy drama Mission Impossible titled The Missile, the IMF team needs to infiltrate the home of a suburban family involved in an international plot. And what home did they use? The Brady Bunch house. The set was redressed with different furniture and decorations, but it is unmistakably the same living room. Seeing spies conduct a tense, high-stakes operation in the same space where the Bradys had food fights and sang It's a Sunshine Day is a surreal, hilarious, and completely accidental crossover that proves that in the world of 70s television production, no set was sacred.